I kind of took a bit of a tough love approach with her. I didn't really want to just be like, make yourself comfortable to die, right? I mean, like, I was like, no, you're fighting this. Like, what, like, let's get up, let's keep doing stuff. So,
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Thrive State Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. V, triple board certified MD and performance and longevity expert. And this is a very special podcast. It might bring you to tears. It might bring you goosebumps of inspiration because I experienced both on this podcast. It is really talking about cancer, which is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. For those of you that don't know, I was an interventional radiologist, which is basically a doctor that uses radiology or medical imaging to perform minimally invasive surgeries. And part of what I did, and a big part of my practice, was that of oncology. I did procedures where I burned and freeze tumors with electrodes. I went into blood vessels and delivered chemotherapy into tumors in the liver. I was an interventional oncologist, a subspecialist as well. And so I've dealt with cancer. So much so that I had been really inspired, prior to going into the performance and longevity space. I was really inspired by a certain subset of people with the cancer diagnosis that seemed to have radically shifted their life for the better after their diagnosis. Back then, I started a nonprofit called the Live Again Project, which is a platform that tells the stories of cancer patients. Many people share with me that it was their diagnosis that finally had them wake up, that prior to their cancer, they were living in what Bruce Lipton would call the matrix, or what Vishen Lakhiani calls the culturescape, programmed to live life a certain way, being stressed out of not being their authentic self. And that eventually created disease in their life. But it was that diagnosis that had them really start to wake up and start to not be a victim of prior circumstances or programming, but become more of an advocate for how they make every single choice. And in doing so, they remarkably improve their prognosis, some of them still in remission today, which brings the story of Brad and Maggie Jones to be somewhat of a deja vu movement, and one that really touches my own heart. For those of you who are just joining the Thrive State podcast, welcome in. This is really a conversation where I bring in thought leaders in the longevity, health, nutrition, relationship, and mindset space to give you the tools, the tactics, and the mindset shifts you might need to elevate your best life, to have optimal health, to have longevity, to be your very best, to perform at your best. And for those of you who have been following along on this podcast, welcome back. Thank you for making this podcast a success. If you haven't already, please help the show grow by going to where podcasts are heard and leaving us a 5-star review. That really helps spread our message. If you didn't already know, back on April 11, we had launched the second edition of my book, Thrive State, and it had hit #1 bestseller list on Amazon. And what is new about the second edition? Well, in the first edition, I really talk about the 7 areas of life, the 7 pillars that we really need to master: our energetic vibration, the messages that we give to ourselves. And if we master those 7 areas, we will have optimal health, longevity, and peak performance. Well, in the second edition, I have additional content in discussing when we start to change that vibration, that not only speaks to every single cell in our body, but it influences the people around us. What is the biological machinery that has other people feel your energetic state? We talk about that in the second edition, so that when you change your state, you're not only sending signals to every single cell in your body, but that signal is elevating outwards. And you're impacting your loved ones, your families, your teams, and your organizations. I also talk about why certain people, once you kind of give them a list of what they want to do to change their life, why does it not happen? Why we have New Year's resolutions every single year and say we're going to be X, Y, and Z, but we don't follow through. Turns out there's a biological explanation for that. There is a part of our body and nervous system called the default mode network. And that is just programs that we picked up in our childhood from mom, dad, media, our traumas or fears. And unless we are conscious of it, those unconscious, subconscious programs run our life, which might sabotage our efforts to become the best version of ourselves. So we talk about that, how to become more aware of those programs, and then how to break free from that to create lasting impact in your life. All that is new in the second edition. Please pick up your copy at thrivestatebook.com or wherever books are sold. Now, on to my guest today. You will find that it is such a remarkable love story between Brad and Maggie Jones. You know, Brad and Maggie's life changed the month she turned 40. And that's the month Maggie was diagnosed with terminal lung cancer. She had cancers in her lungs that actually metastasized to her brain, and she was going blind out of one eye. They actually received a prognosis of less than a year. But since that diagnosis, with the traditional medicine that she did receive, along with all these new holistic metabolic therapies that she took on, lifestyle factors that she took on, new choices that she made in her life. So she has now been cancer-free for 4 years now, and she and her husband has dedicated their lives to sharing the evidence-based treatments that has dramatically improved her survival and quality of life. Over the course of her healing, Maggie was able to establish friendships with scientists and practitioners such as myself that is really changing the cancer paradigm, is really talking not only with drugs themselves, but how we live our life is medicine. And if you are familiar with me and my work, that has really been a mantra and tagline that I say all the time, that we indeed, through our being and our choices and how we live our life, is our best medicine. Both Maggie and Brad have now become a prominent voice in the metabolic cancer treatment community. She and her husband, Brad, is actually a filmmaker and really the force behind an award-winning docuseries featuring some of the leading scientists and practitioners on the metabolic theory of cancer. During this conversation, you'll find out more about their docuseries as well as the summit. You're really going to want to listen in on this conversation if you have cancer yourself, know of someone with cancer, or just really want to have the tools to live your best life. This is a conversation I think will benefit anybody. So please enjoy this conversation on the Thrive State podcast with Brad and Maggie Jones. Brad and Maggie Jones, welcome to the Thrive State podcast.
Dr. Vuu, thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having us.
You are the first on the Thrive State podcast to come on as a dual. So we're going to do something special. People in the show know I do a segment called the 5 to Thrive, which is 5 quick questions, game show style. And the winner actually gets a meal on me, a healthy meal on me, a nutritious meal on me if they win. But since we have 2 contestants today, we're going to play something a little bit different, called it's called the 5 to Thrive. I wouldn't say newlywed game because you guys aren't newlyweds. But we'll do something here. And for those who are just listening in on the podcast, I'm going to have them raise their hand and see if they are correct or not. Actually, they're not going to raise their hand. They're just going to point to each other. I'm going to ask 5 questions. And if they think their answer is them, they're going to point to themselves. If they think it is their partner, they're going to point to their partner. So right. I'm going to have both Brad and Maggie face me now so that they can't face each other or look at each other. And then on the count of 3, after I ask the questions, I'm going to count to 3 and they're going to point to either themselves or their partner. And we'll ask them 5 questions. If they are able to get the 5 to Thrive correct, they will also get a meal on me the next time we meet. So, Maggie and Brad Jones, are you ready to play the Five to Thrive?
Never been readier.
Yeah,
All right, here we
do
go.
it.
Question number one. Who is the cleaner of the two of you? On 1, 2, 3. Oh, yes. All right. You got it right. Both pointed to Maggie. All right. 1,000 points there. Question number 2. Who showed first interest in your relationship? On 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah.
What is
it was
that?
like instant attraction. I was like, that's like, I mean,
For those who are listening, there were a lot of eye rolling, eyes going different places. So it was a really difficult question. Maybe they were both.
literally, she walked into a room, we locked eyes, and that was it. Like, yeah.
20 years later.
Yeah, neither one of us could claim victory on that question. Yeah.
Very good. And how long ago was that, you said?
20 years.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. Love for 20 years. I love that. Question number 3. And we do know that that relationships or nurturing relationships is such an important aspect of health and healing. So I'm glad that that's something that you guys are able to show the audience here. Question number 3. Who is the better singer of the two? In 3, 2, 1, go. All right, so we've got Brad and Maggie both pointing at Brad. They are 3 for 3. Brad, what is the favorite song you sing if you had to go on a karaoke stage?
I mean, I
Nothing good. Just nothing good. Skip this.
I like a good Neil Diamond song if I'm in karaoke.
All right, here we go. Question number 4. Who is the better chef? In 3, 2, 1. Barely. Oh, I think they pointed at each other, or is she pointing at yourself?
I said barely. Barely.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right.
I think she pointed at herself twice.
So Maggie is the winner on that one, and you guys both won because you guys both got that one right. And the last question here is the last piece of dessert is on the table. And of course, it's a healthy treat, not with tons of sugar in it. And it's a very delectable treat. 1 bite left. Who gets the last bite in 3, 2, and 1? Yes. Brad, that's why you were able to make it 20 years. Congratulations. Well, that was super fun. This was the first time we did that. Potentially we'll do that more in the future. Brad and Maggie Jones, welcome. You guys are the founders and creators of the Cancer Evolution docuseries, and there's also going to be a summit. So before we actually dive into the work you guys are going to be doing together, let's talk a little bit about, well, we know we'll get your personal story on the cancer in a second, Maggie. But prior to that, there was a love story that happened 20 years ago. And so take me to the time, 20 years you guys spent together. What was that relationship like prior to the point of Maggie's diagnosis?
I think like all relationships, it went through a lot of different stages. And from the very beginning, we knew we were meant to be together, but there were a lot of ups and downs. We were both very young, some ons and offs. But once we made the commitment, we got married in 2010. It was all amazing, but we got very into our work, our first house, things like that. And stress became a big part of it. And for me, a little bit of even resentments that naturally occur during anybody's relationship. And so we decided back in 2018 to make a huge change in our life and moved from our home in Los Angeles to Hong Kong.
Wow.
And we'd never been to Asia before, certainly not to Hong Kong before, but we knew we needed this change in our life, and it was going to be so exciting, this new adventure.
Amazing. Do either of you speak any Cantonese?
Nope. Oh, no, you're Mandarin.
No, Yeah.
Hungay sai.
Yeah, just going back 20 years, I mean, we just had a ton of fun. We lived in LA at the time. Um, and we were driving out to Vegas, staying at the Hard Rock and, just kind of living the good life, as it were, unbeknownst to us, like how sort of detrimental that lifestyle could be. I think our
Mm.
bodies could handle it a little bit better at the time, but eventually it kind of caught up with us.
I was very
Yeah.
much an alcohol enthusiast and
Yeah.
enjoyed about a bottle of white wine a night just to
Mm.
get to work the next day.
Yeah, and remind everybody what you guys did for a living. I hear Brad, you're sort of the creative, and Maggie, you've been sort of like in the media and IT space. Is that correct?
Exactly. I was a VP of product and technology at different media companies, including like LA Times, the Chicago Tribune. And then what brought me to Hong Kong was my role at the South China Morning Post.
Oh, I see.
So it was a nice combination of journalism and technology, which really appeals to me.
Yeah. And I worked for a lot of years, like almost 20 years in Hollywood as a video editor. And my sort of large credit or claim to fame is I was a supervising editor on Jersey Shore for a while.
Oh, wow.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. Making some great content for the viewers of America.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, that just her side of sort of being a manager, my side of sort of being almost a documentary filmmaker, sort of a reality television editor. We sort of put those two together, and that's where led us to where we are today.
Oh, that's amazing. Let's now talk about the diagnosis. Where were you? What was happening in your body? What was happening in your life? What got you your initial doctor's appointment? And tell us a little bit about that journey.
Yeah, so right before we moved to Hong Kong in 2018, was having symptoms. As early as 2017, I had a really bad cough. And I
Mm.
went to urgent care when it got bad enough. And I even asked for a chest x-ray, and the doctor kind of rolled her eyes and gave me a great cough suppressant. I didn't think about it again. Well, we were packing up for Hong Kong. I definitely had a lot of pressure in my neck that I attributed to, oh, I'm just getting fat. If I raised my arms, I would feel a lot of compression. I had some issues in my eye and my vision. I saw an ophthalmologist at one point and actually got an MRI, and they said, oh, it's optical migraines. So all these little symptoms adding up, but there was too much to do to really pay attention to it. I had to get packed for Hong Kong. We were renting our house. And we arrived in Hong Kong 1 week before my 40th birthday and started my job. Obviously, I wanted to make a great impact, but I wasn't thinking as well as I normally do. And I thought, oh, it's just adjusting. And it was exactly 1 month into our stay at Hong Kong that I admitted to Brad how bad my vision was getting. In
Mm.
my right eye, I was actually going blind. And eventually we decided, well, it's probably a detached retina. And we really wanted to be able to travel around Asia. So he got me to go to an ophthalmologist on a Sunday. And I had to look everywhere in Hong Kong to find somebody who was open on a Sunday. Thank goodness it was the best hospital in Hong Kong where I went. The ophthalmologist looked in my eye, got a little somber. He actually ordered me to get an emergency MRI that night and told me to come back the next Monday to get the results. When I got in that morning, I sat and I was thinking, man, this is a lot for an issue with my eye. And it was only at the end of his shift at 7 p.m. that night that he came in and told me that I had cancer, and that the MRI had shown not just tumors in my eye, but also in my brain, and that these tumors have probably come from somewhere else, almost certainly from my lungs, because I had a terrible cough and it had one since I got to Hong Kong, which I thought was Beijing lung. And so there we were. And Brad came in. He spent the night with me in the hospital that first night. And I think we were just silent, didn't know how to respond. But that first week, I really just wanted to be a good patient. I wanted to die well, and I wanted to make my doctors proud and Brad proud. And that was such BS. So glad I got over it the next weekend. Brad took me away from work. to the Gold Coast in Hong Kong, and I started reading. And I was reading all these books on healing, on the metabolic theory of cancer. And that's when I got it into my head that, hey, the survival for somebody with lung cancer that spread to the brain is not good. The
Mm.
5-year survival rate is less than 1%, and that means it rounds to zero. But I thought, man, if one person can do it, I am that person who can do it. And what do we always say? 1% of a million is 1,000 people, and it's possible. Why not give it a try? And I'm just going to cut to the chase. I started doing some of these metabolic treatments in addition to my conventional treatment. And exactly 1 year later, from that very first scan, I was cancer free. And that
That is
was
amazing. So
over 5 years.
let's talk about the cancer. They discovered that it was a lung cancer that you did have, and it metastasized to the brain. So at that point, it was a stage 4 cancer. And typically, most lung cancers, for people that don't know, are related to people who smoke. That's something that you've never done before. So that was certainly a surprise. Something turned on the genetic key to turn that on, right?
Exactly. And
But
I'd socially smoked a few cigarettes before, but I
yeah.
have a genetic mutation called ROS1 positive, which
Mhm.
is a non-smoker's mutation. And it's
Yeah.
becoming more and more common, as you probably know, ALK mutations. And these tend to affect younger women in their 30s and 40s, non-smokers, with giving them lung cancer. It's almost 10% of lung cancers are non-smoker related now.
Mm. So you've done these metabolic theories. Now, what in that book did you understand about the metabolic theory of cancer? And what were some of those things that you did over the course of that year?
For me, at the very beginning, my gosh, the very first thing I read was something very light by Chris Carr, but it mentioned fasting. And a lot of people had great hope with fasting. Then there was Radical Remission by Dr. Kelly Turner, and she mentions fasting and diet change. And so I started there with the diet. And I decided that if I wasn't going to put anything into my mouth that wasn't actively healing for my body, nothing that wasn't a medicine. And that sent Brad running around Hong Kong just searching for organic vegetables, everything like that. And that was difficult. But luckily, I was also on chemo at the time and I had some radiation, so I couldn't eat anything anyway. And that put me into a lot of a fasting mimicking state for the first 3 months. And I lost 50 pounds actually the first 3 months. I was overweight before. I mentioned I was drinking way too much and I cut that out completely.
Mhm.
I thought I was eating the typical healthy American diet. I had a healthy eating blog focusing on whole grains, lean meats, and dairy, like things that I would absolutely not eat now. And so I changed everything completely. And then I started doing other things like de-stressing. I was very affected by stress. I was on anti-anxiety treatment that I had to go off for my chemo. And you can just imagine getting a stage 4 terminal diagnosis and being told, and also get off your anti-anxiety meds. It wasn't
Mm.
so great. But I found mindfulness based stress reductions, meditation, yoga, and all of this just steamrolled. And I started fasting more and more. And that made me feel so good until I was at that 1 year later scan and I realized my results were real and that they actually made a difference.
That is amazing. Now, Brad, as you were seeing Maggie go through this with the initial diagnosis, where was your mind? Was it, I'm just going to be here in support? Did you have hope? Did you think that this was a death sentence?
Um, to be honest, I never really thought it was a death sentence. I just kind of know Maggie and I knew she was gonna fight. But yeah, but it was very difficult, right? Just trying to just full of emotion, but then also trying to sort of keep that from her, right? It was just trying to be strong in front of her. That's really what I was going through. And we kind of talk about this sometimes, which is I kind of took a bit of a tough love approach with her. I didn't really want to just be like, make yourself comfortable to die, right? I mean, like, I was like, no, you're fighting this. Like, what, like, let's get up, let's keep doing stuff. So I think that something we were in Hong Kong to see Asia, and I think we went to
Nine countries.
9 countries. I mean, a couple of times we didn't really do that much. I'll be honest. Like a quick weekend, and we just kind of walked around. But it was just like we stayed active.
But I was working the whole time. And,
Yeah,
sometimes I wanted that pity. I wanted Brad to feel sorry for me. And I wanted to get somebody on the subway to get up and let me sit down. But his attitude made sure I never acted like a victim. And so then I
Mm,
stopped feeling like a victim. And
so
just
pretty
good.
soon I
yeah,
wasn't a victim.
just trying to keep living our lives. That was, I think, the one of the things. I just didn't want us to
Mm. Oh,
hole
I'm
up
getting
and
goosebumps. A couple of
yeah.
years ago, I founded a nonprofit called the Live Again Project, and really, it was a story, or it was a platform for people to share their stories around cancer, and how many people shared the stories that they weren't really living prior to their diagnosis. They were going through life like just through a program, and just reacted to things and became victims of whatever their circumstances were. And how it was amazing to see that it was the diagnosis that woke people up to the fact that they have conscious choice in terms of how they choose to live their life. Um, and
Oh,
and the ones that I found that shared a very similar story with you, when they change their stress levels, their sleep levels, their nutrition, their movement, their emotions, where they spend, their focus, and really started to live again, a lot of them started to improve dramatically in their symptoms, and shared very similar stories of remission as well. And so that was back in 2018, 19. You said that it was a year later. Are you still cancer free at this point? This episode of the Thrive State podcast is brought to you by the Thrive State Accelerator. The Thrive State Accelerator is actually a home course that I developed using the exact same techniques I work with my celebrity clients, CEOs, and executives on how to get them to the Thrive State. The Thrive State Accelerator teaches you how to master your 7 bioenergetic elements. That's sleep, nutrition, movement, stress and emotional mastery, relationships, our thoughts and mindset, as well as purpose. In this Thrive State Accelerator, you're also going to get a bonus module on optimization. That's how I talk about supplementation, peptides, all the optimization techniques I use with my clients to get them to the Thrive State. Now, for some of you who are just joining us for the first time, you guys might be wondering, what is the Thrive State? Well, the Thrive State is actually the energy, the epigenetic environment we give to ourselves, telling our DNA how to act and how to respond. And if we want optimal health, longevity, and peak performance, if we can master these 7 bioenergetic elements, our ability to have those 3 things that we just said, optimal health, longevity, and peak performance, is at its greatest. And it also prevents you from getting chronic symptoms like brain fog, being overweight, feeling sluggish, acne, pain, all these chronic symptoms, as well as preventing you from getting chronic disease. So getting to that Thrive State is really getting to that state to master being that very best version of yourself, so you could show up for you, for your family, for your business, everything that's important to you. So go ahead, check it out right now at kienvuu.com/accelerator and use coupon code podcast25 for 25% off. Now back to the podcast.
In the sense that anybody is cancer free. And this is something that I love to focus on with people. I feel terrible that I ever publicize my no evidence of disease status, because people feel like they have to be that. And honestly, Brad has cancer, you have cancer, everybody has these cells constantly forming in their bodies. Their immune system takes care of it. Mine didn't do a good job of it. And so mine showed up in scans for a while, and it doesn't show up in scans now, but it doesn't mean that it's not there. And I think that's so important for people who are healing, to not feel that they're cured, that this is a healing process for our entire lives. And what you were saying earlier, that was giving me chills, because that was exactly my experience. That I realized with this diagnosis, I had never experienced life before. I was just waiting for the next thing. Like, let's get the dishes done. Let's go on this next vacation. Let's retire and then finally die. And I realized, oh my gosh, I have 6 to 8 months to live. I'm going to live. I'm going to feel my body, experience that. And I just am trying to keep that up now and however much time I have left. I'm so lucky to have this time.
And this is an amazing story, and I'm glad you're sharing this information with the world. I would imagine then, feeling so different, with more energy levels, and also sort of being on top of this thing that was probably looming over your head, and having some control over it now. I would assume this is what inspired cancer evolution. Is that correct? Or how was that birthed?
Well, let me start actually just first saying I no longer fear my cancer at all. I do have radiation necrosis from my brain radiation treatments. And so my neuro-oncologist just recently said in my last scans that if 10 different doctors looked at my brain scans, 10 different doctors would agree that I'm a vegetable, that I'm doing great. But I do struggle with this, which is why you'll hear my speech sometimes isn't optimal. And I eventually went on disability where I could no longer work. And I decided just to focus on my health completely. And it was after my first seizure, Brad and I were actually living in Vienna at that time, that we looked at each other
Briefly. Yeah.
long and hard. And we're like, where are we going to go next? You're having seizures. Something has to be done. And we decided to come back to the US to Seattle. And we're like, what are we going to do here? And that's when Brad had this idea.
Yeah, I mean, there was sort of this time period where between Maggie, had this clean scan about a year after her diagnosis, and during COVID, everything was like a little crazy, and so between that and between when we finally came back to the U.S., where Maggie was she was doing a blog, she was like sort of doing some just some coaching on the side, just trying to like help people through their diagnosis. And she just was sort of becoming frustrated with the ability to get the information out there quickly enough. I mean, her blog is still a great resource, but we just wanted to make it a little bit easier.
Yeah.
And so when we got back to the States and we got back to Seattle, I was like, hey, why don't we make a documentary? I think if we can get a couple people to agree to be interviewed, that it would be, we could make it in a way that was sort of different than the stuff that's out there. And not that anything out there is inadequate or anything, but it tends to sort of edge towards the like hard science. We'd been to a couple of metabolic health conferences, and man, I mean, every other sort of presentation, I would have to go and look a ton of things up on Google to understand what they were talking about, right?
Yeah.
And so we were just like, well, what if we sort of tried to take this information and just make it a little bit easier to understand, try and interweave some kind of story. We had no idea what that would even be at the time, but try to, make it a good like storytelling. And so, yeah, we got really lucky in that we had met Travis Christofferson before. He agreed to be interviewed by us. And then I think he actually asked Thomas Seyfried, or maybe mentioned us to Thomas Seyfried. So basically, once we had the two of them on board, then it sort of added some legitimacy to our project, and a lot of other people signed up. So we're really, really grateful to the two of them for very early on. I mean, we were just two random people, like we had never made a documentary before at all, and they both agreed to be interviewed. So huge thanks to them. And yeah, it's just kind of snowballed from there.
That's amazing. I noticed when you did talk about your healing process, you did still take on all the traditional medicine while really making radical changes to your lifestyle. There are some people who shun traditional medicine altogether. What was the thought process in terms of your approach here? There are people out there that are like, you know what, should I believe in the traditional medical model? Should I trust them fully? How do I incorporate these other alternative healing modalities? And there are some people that just say, you know what, I don't trust that. I'm going to go full alternative. How did you end up landing on using this hybrid approach?
My cancer was never curable since it was diagnosed. My only options were palliative, something that would ease the pain. And in that first month, I was in severe pain. I couldn't breathe going upstairs. I couldn't sit up to sleep or to lay down to sleep.
We got
I
an
was,
oxygen compressor.
yeah, I was dying. And I grew up believing in allopathic medicine. And to me, I never questioned. And it's been a slow process of me reading journals, talking to people, case studies, anecdotal evidence to kind of reshape my thinking. I think that allopathic medicine has amazing benefits, but I also know that there are these philosophies, things like traditional Chinese medicine, Ayurveda, that have been around for millennia. And it's absurd for us to discount that for this medicine that's been amazing, but only for the last 100 years. And so for me, I found the balance that works for me. And I really respect anyone who finds that balance for themselves, whether there's also what I talk about is this power of the placebo and your own belief of what's going to work for
Yeah.
you. And for me, most of the studies I was reading were talking about the benefits of these metabolic therapies like keto and fasting in conjunction with your traditional therapies. But for others, I've a lot of friends who are featured in the documentary who also were uncurable. They had this only palliative option and chose not to take those. And I understand why. The side effects are horrific and have seen the same success that I have. So I think it depends on the
Yeah.
individual. And
And if I could add a little bit from the science side, one of the things that we were hearing about as we were interviewing people, like in particular, Dr. Walter Longo, with fasting, he now his lab tests are all in mice, but what he was finding was that he could give mice that had cancer the ketogenic diet or fast them, and then when he gave them some conventional treatment, it was more effective. So he could do two things. One, if you couldn't, if you needed more of a drug, that was a way of sort of boosting it. And
Mhm.
another thing that happened was is if it was a really strong drug, you could lower the dosage.
Mm.
And this is also coming into play with another drug that, like other drugs that are like, say, too toxic, right? It's like,
Yeah.
well, now maybe these drugs that we thought weren't going to be able to help with cancer, maybe they'll be able to help with cancer. So we didn't know this at the time, but I mean, I can't help but think that might have played a role in Maggie's healing as well.
That's really amazing. I mean, certainly once you start to change the lifestyle, the belief, you were already changing the energetic and the messages you are giving to the cells in your body. And therefore, I think makes other things certainly work a heck of a lot better. And such a great story of how our perspective, our choices, and how we choose to live in every single moment makes a big difference in our life. And I one of my taglines is "You are your best medicine," and I can't help but see that in the glow that you guys both demonstrate in your energy now. So let's talk a little bit between. I know there is a docu series that's out, and there's also a summit that's out. Can you tell us a little bit of, you know, who they could see on either one, and what the difference of the two is?
yes, so actually, the series started out as a documentary that we wanted to film, but when we took the original footage and we showed it to like 30 stakeholders, doctors, practitioners, they agreed that you can't cut any of this. And so it turned into this 5-hour docu-series. And this is incredible. This explains the why of metabolic therapies, why they work from their very origination 100 years ago with Dr. Otto Warburg, the Nobel Prize winner, up to how his theory has evolved through scientists to today and what we have.
Mhm.
The summit, on the other hand, science changes so rapidly, and we're not in a position to tell people what to do. You have to hear that from the scientists, practitioners, clinicians. And so for the summit, we're bringing them together to talk about the how, the most leading, cutting edge how of implementing these therapies, whether they might work for you, and just things that we're not qualified even to report on. So on the series, oh my gosh, I'm never going to remember all the wonderful people that we have. Check out cancerrevolution.film. And at the summit, we have over 35 wonderful doctors who have chosen to help us, and other clinicians, scientists. I'm thinking most recently of our keynote speakers, Dr. Haima Safri, who everyone knows, and Dr. Bruce Lipton, who actually touches on so much of what you talk about, Dr. V, with the environment. And he connects it to the cancer microenvironment too, which is an amazing presentation. And yeah, to check out the over 35 speakers, you can look at cancerrevolution.events.
Okay, well, fantastic. We're going to include a coupon code. Everyone can use Thrive State 20 to receive a discount. In doing so, I'm super pumped. I'm super excited. And who's this Dr. V character you guys have, coming on speaking?
Oh,
I have to question your credibility now with the, I'm kidding.
Oh my gosh, I hope he's at the summit.
Do you think we can get him?
I don't know.
Okay.
We'll have to call his people.
Well, this is really great. And
thank you so much for being a part of the summit, by the way. Yeah.
Oh, I am happy to do so after, certainly, being an interventional oncologist, and treating a lot of cancer patients before, founding the Living End Project. This is really the work that I did there really started to promote my work in longevity and performance, because, I didn't have cancer per se, but I had another metabolic disease, which was diabetes, which, and then also high blood pressure. And I knew that if I continued down that path, my chance of getting cancer or heart disease and all those things increased several fold. And as I started to do very similar work in my journey of healing, I had discovered a new version of myself as well. And also discovered that, as we do this, we not only can prevent and potentially even reverse disease like you and I both have, but really access probably the best parts of ourselves, to access optimal health, to access longevity, to access peak performance. Once we know our own purpose and start to serve other people with the struggles and with the gift that cancer and diabetes gave to both you and I, right?
Yes, you understand. Right? That's so beautiful.
Yeah, and she dragged me along. So yeah, so I got the benefit without having to go through the pain part.
So I feel there's a book coming on.
Have
you guys started talking about that?
So many projects.
Yeah.
First, we have to do Diabetes Revolution with another Dr. V.
Oh yeah. Well, fantastic. You guys, are such a living and breathing example of the medicine vibration of love and support and community, and that conscious living in that vibration is very healing, and also that's an energy that I think the world could use more of. Super excited for both the docu-series and the summit. We will include in our show notes all when things are going to be coming out, as well as the coupon code that you guys could both use. Now, before I ask my very last question, let's list, how people could find you guys on social or on the web. What are some websites or social media handles people should be aware of?
I think the two best are Cancer Evolution. So it sounds like one R in the middle, .film is where you can find everything about the film. And cancerevolution.events is where you can find out about the summit. And those will have links to our YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, which have the handle Cancer Evolution Doc, and Twitter, which is @CancerEvolves. No TikTok yet.
Yeah, I've got quite a few good clips, I feel like, up on YouTube. So that's definitely a good place to go. But you can find us, get to there from the website.
That sounds fantastic. And so now we come down to the last question. And unlike the 5 to Thrive for newlyweds, it's okay to have different answers. So after going through all the healing modalities, traditional allopathic medicine, alternative therapies, your relationship with each other, what has been for each of you your best medicine?
It's gratitude and love.
Mm,
And I'm
yeah.
so grateful to you for having us on, for this community, for supporting us. That's number one. There's so many backups: fasting, exercise, but gratitude and love.
Yeah. Yeah, certainly the, sort of the willpower. And I guess if we had to like nail it down to actually something that she did, we talk about it sometimes, which we really think the fasting was probably number one. If you held us at gunpoint and we're just like, you only get one, I think we would probably choose the fasting. It's a tough call, but I think that's where we would go. But yeah. And I guess the other thing that really helped out, even though it's not actually a medicine, was just being a self-advocate. That was,
Yeah.
I mean, like actually, Maggie actually taking the time to like learn these things, find out about them, and then follow through on them. That I think, we pushed back with Doctor. We didn't tell you any of those stories, but yeah, like,
That's everything you talk about.
yeah,
And your
exactly.
listeners know you have to be your own advocate. Self-agency is
Yeah,
enormous.
yeah.
Now, I'm listening from my audience, and they want to know, what was your fasting protocol, and sort of what's the diet, then, or what's the diet now?
Brad and I just broke a 2-day fast. So we've really ramped it up over time, even after the good news. So we've always fasted on Monday, which means from dinner Sunday to dinner Tuesday. And then while I was healing, we were OMAD, one meal a day for the weekdays. We'd have 2 meals on Saturday and Sunday, and then back to fasting. And this is because I managed my GKI, my glucose ketone index, very closely, and I needed that period of fasting. Started bumping it up every month. We would do about 3 days. Now we try to do 3 to 5 every month. And then once a year, I was doing a big one, 7 to 10 days.
Amazing. Okay. And these would be water fasts?
Water and electrolytes. Yeah.
Okay.
Some green tea.
That is amazing. And what does the diet look like now?
Back in the day, it was, oh my gosh, it sounds crazy, but it was plant-based keto. So it was completely ketogenic, but everything, like I said, was healing, coming in. And now we're all about metabolic flexibility. So we'll have
Great.
periods of carnivore, of just balanced whole foods, plant-based, but it's always whole foods. It's always organic for us.
I'd say we say mostly keto, and then just sort of
low carb always.
Yeah, we're kind of always low carb, and then
we just had some carrots.
Yeah, we might like on a Saturday, it's like we have some apples or have a potato. It's like we're but it's within
You're two crazy cats.
Yeah, I know. Right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Shame.
Yeah,
now everybody knows.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you. I mean, you guys are real, and really, thank you for being so vulnerable and sharing your life and your journey with my audience. We are deeply grateful for this, and I know people will learn so much. Not only if they have cancer or know somebody with cancer, but I think the things that you guys touch upon in here, I feel like so many metabolic diseases have these same root causes of really forgetting how we should be living. And so I think, for anyone who wants to optimize their health, to check out your work. Brad and Maggie Jones, thank you so much.
One more thing in really quick.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
We are actively trying to find people that have that had cancer, that have used a metabolic therapy that was successful in any way. So if you see this and you have been through that process, we would love to speak with you. So please reach out to us.
Sounds great. Brad and Maggie Jones, thank you so much. The docuseries and the summit is Cancer Evolution. I definitely recommend you guys check it out. And Brad and Maggie, I'm pretty sure we'll collaborate again soon. Thank you for being on the Thrive State podcast.
Dr. V, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Thrive State podcast. And if this podcast is bringing a lot of value to you, if you're find that your life is just improving with this podcast, that your life is getting to the next level, please consider supporting it. And here's a few ways you can do so. You can do so by liking this video and commenting on this video, and also sharing this video with your friends and family. Another thing you can do is go to ratethispodcast.com/ThriveState. Go ahead and leave us a 5-star review there. It will really, really help this show grow. And this will give me more time so that I could actually give more content to you, just like you got in this episode. And if you haven't already picked up a copy of my book, Thrive State, Your Blueprint for Optimal Health, Longevity, and Peak Performance, you can pick it up now. It became a #1 new release in longevity. Go to thrivestatebook.com. And if you enjoy the book, please consider leaving us a review as well. And the last thing you can do, if you're liking everything here and you want to work more closely with me as well as my team to get you into the Thrive State, go to kienvuu.com/accelerator and consider joining the home course, the Thrive State Accelerator. It's really the course that I use. It's the concepts that I use personally when I work with CEOs, celebrities, and my high-profile clients to get them to the Thrive State. Again, the Thrive State Accelerator at kienvuu.com/accelerator. And because you're a listener of this podcast, I want you to save 25% by using the coupon code podcast25. I hope we continue to give value to you. And remember always, you are your best medicine.